Jake Morrison stood at the window of his ship, watching the stars drift by like scattered diamonds on black cloth. The message from Earth still glowed on his screen behind him. The words burned into his memory after reading them 100 times. Find them. Learn why they left. Learn what we lost. 50 years had passed since humans walked away from the Galactic Federation, 50 years of silence from the species that once filled the galaxy with their laughter, their music, their endless questions about everything they encountered. Jake had been just a child when it happened, too young to understand why his parents spoke in hushed voices about the empty embassies and the quiet departure of every human from Federation space. Now he commanded the exploration vessel Horizon, one of the few ships Earth still sent beyond their borders. His mission was simple in words but complex in meaning. The Earth government wanted answers. They wanted to know what had driven humanity to abandon their dreams of galactic civilization and retreat to their small corner of space. The navigation system chimed softly. Kepler Station appeared ahead, a massive wheel of metal and glass spinning slowly against the backdrop of a red dwarf star. Once it had been humanity's crown jewel in Federation space, the diplomatic headquarters where human ambassadors had worked to build bridges between species that had never learned to trust each other. Now it served as something else entirely. Jake docked his ship and walked through the airlocks into corridors that felt like a tomb. The station still hummed with life, but it was alien life now. The walls bore plaques in 17 different languages, all saying the same thing: Memorial to Human Contribution to Galactic Peace, Museum of Terran Diplomatic Achievement. Jake felt sick reading them. A tall figure approached him, moving with the flowing grace of the Veltari species. This one wore the simple robes of a museum curator, and its large, dark eyes held what Jake had learned to recognize as sadness in their kind. "Captain Morrison," the being said in perfect English, its voice carrying the musical quality all Veltari possessed. "We have been expecting you. I am Veltar, keeper of this place. We received word from your government that you would come." Jake nodded, not trusting his voice yet. Something about this place, about the careful preservation of human spaces by alien hands, made his throat tight. "We have maintained everything exactly as your people left it," Veltar continued, beginning to walk down a corridor lined with doors, bearing human names. "Nothing has been disturbed. Nothing has been changed. We hoped that someday humans would return to see what they built here." They passed office after office, each one sealed behind transparent barriers but fully visible. Jake could see the personal touches that made each space uniquely human. A small plant dying in a window, a coffee maker sitting cold and unused, pictures of Earth hanging on walls next to certificates of diplomatic achievement. "Why?" Jake asked, the word coming out rougher than he intended. "Why preserve all this?" Veltar stopped walking and turned those large eyes on him. "Because we hope. Because we regret. Because we know we lost something precious when humans walked away, and we do not fully understand what it was." They entered what had once been the main diplomatic suite. The nameplate on the door read Ambassador Lisa Carter, and Jake remembered her from the history books. She had been instrumental in the peace negotiations between the Krelthi and the Altaran Empire, preventing a war that could have consumed half the galaxy. Inside the office, everything remained exactly as she had left it, papers scattered across. The desk as if she had just stepped out for a moment. A child's drawing taped to the wall, showing Earth as a blue and green marble surrounded by smiling stick figures representing different alien species. The words, "My mom helps everyone be friends," written in crayon across the bottom. Jake picked up a datapad from the desk and activated it. Lisa Carter's personal logs appeared, hundreds of entries documenting her work on the station. He scrolled through them, noting the enthusiasm in the early entries, the satisfaction of successful negotiations, the joy of breakthrough moments. when longtime enemies agreed to work together. But as the dates progressed, the tone changed. The entries became shorter, less enthusiastic. Words like concerned and troubled began appearing more frequently. The final entry was dated just 3 days before the human exodus began. "I cannot sleep," the entry read. "The reports coming in from the Vorth sector trouble me deeply. The entire collective has simply vanished. No distress signals, no evidence of conflict. They are simply gone as if they never existed. The Federation claims it is a natural disaster, but something feels wrong about their explanation. How does an entire civilization disappear without a trace?" Jake set the pad down and looked around the office again. On a small table near the window sat a coffee mug with "Galaxy's Best Negotiator" printed on the side. It still held the remains of what had been coffee 50 years ago, now just a dark stain at the bottom. "She never came back for her things," Jake said, more to himself than to Veltar. "None of them did," the curator replied. "They left as if they intended to return the next day, but they never did. We waited. We sent messages. We offered to ship their belongings to Earth, but your government never responded." Jake moved to another office, this one belonging to trade negotiator Ryan Phillips. The desk held 3 pictures of a smiling woman and 2 young children. A note was stuck to his computer monitor. "Pick up milk. Call Mom. Finish Tessian trade. Proposal." The everyday reminders of a life interrupted. In the break room, Jake found something that made him pause. The coffee maker was an expensive model, clearly well used and well loved. Someone had left a note next to it. "Broken again? Jake from maintenance says he can fix it Tuesday." Tuesday had never come. But it was in the office of Chief Science Advisor Amy Watson that Jake found what he was looking for. Her desk was neater than the others, more organized, as if she had been preparing to leave. Her computer was still logged in, displaying the final document she had been working on. It was a resignation letter, never sent. Jake read it with growing unease. The letter detailed Dr. Watson's growing concerns about how human scientific contributions were being used by the Federation. She wrote about discoveries made by human researchers that had somehow been connected to the disappearance of several minor species. She mentioned patterns that troubled her, coincidences that seemed too convenient to be accidental. The final paragraph made Jake's blood run cold. "I cannot continue to smile and nod while they use our discoveries to eliminate species they deem problematic. I will not be party to genocide, no matter how they dress it up as natural disaster or inevitable evolution. If this is the price of galactic civilization, it is too high for any decent being to pay." The letter was dated the day before the human exodus began. Jake sat back in the chair, staring at the screen. Slowly, pieces of a puzzle he had not even known existed began to form in his mind. The sudden departure, the refusal to communicate, the careful way Earth had sealed its borders and turned inward. Humans had not left the Federation in anger. They had left in horror. "Veltar," Jake called, and the curator appeared in the doorway immediately. "I need to see the Federation archives, all of them, especially the classified sections dealing with species that have gone extinct in the last 60 years. The tall being's form seemed to droop. "I was afraid you would ask that eventually." "Yes, Captain Morrison, I will arrange access. But I must warn you, what you find there may not bring you the peace you seek." Jake looked around Amy Watson's office one more time, at the personal touches that made it human, at the resignation letter that told the story of a species that had discovered something too terrible to ignore. "I'm not looking for peace," he said quietly. "I'm looking for truth." The Federation archives occupied an entire section of Kepler Station, a vast digital library containing the recorded history of 14 species and their interactions across 3 centuries. Jake walked through corridors lined with data storage units, each one humming with the quiet energy of preserved knowledge. The air here felt different, heavier somehow, as if the weight of accumulated secrets pressed down on everything. Historian Zeth Cool waited for him in the main research chamber, a spider-like being with 8 delicate arms and multiple eyes that moved independently of each other. Jake had worked with the Zeth Cool species before and knew their reputation for obsessive record-keeping and absolute honesty. If anyone would have preserved the truth about human contributions to the Federation, it would be one of them. "Captain Morrison," Zeth Cool said, his voice carrying the clicking undertones common to his species. "I have prepared the files you requested, but I must warn you, what you will discover may change how you view your species' time among us." The historian's multiple eyes dimmed in sequence, a display Jake recognized as deep sadness among the Zethkul. This being had clearly formed attachments to the humans who had worked here, and their departure had affected him personally. "I worked closely with your researchers," Zethkul continued, activating a massive holographic display that filled the chamber. "Dr. Ben Taylor, Dr. Kate Rogers, Dr. Amanda Pierce, and many others. They were remarkable beings, capable of seeing connections that eluded the rest of us for generations." The hologram showed a timeline of human achievements within the Federation. Jake watched in amazement as breakthrough after breakthrough scrolled past. Solutions to energy crises that had plagued worlds for centuries. Communication protocols that allowed previously incompatible species to work together. Medical advances that had saved billions of lives across the galaxy. "Your Dr. Taylor was particularly gifted," Zeth Cool said, highlighting a specific entry. "The Silent Ones had been a mystery to us for over 200 years. We knew they existed, we could detect their ships, but we could never establish contact. They seemed to operate on entirely different principles than any known species." The display showed complex mathematical formulas and wave patterns. Jake could barely follow the technical details, but the results were clear. Dr. Taylor had cracked the communication barrier in just 6 months of work. "How did he do it?" Jake asked. "Pattern recognition," Zeth Cool replied. "Humans excel at finding patterns in seemingly random data." Dr. Taylor noticed that the Silent One's ship movements followed mathematical sequences that corresponded to prime numbers in base 7 mathematics. Once he realized they were trying to communicate through navigation patterns rather than traditional signals, contact became possible. Jake felt a surge of pride in his species, but it was quickly tempered by unease. If humans had been so successful, so valued, why had they left? "Show me what happened to the Silent Ones," he said. Zethkul's eyes dimmed further. 3 months after first contact was established, their entire civilization vanished. Every ship, every outpost, every trace of their existence simply disappeared from our sensors. The timeline showed the progression clearly. First contact in March, successful diplomatic meetings in April and May, complete disappearance in June. The Federation's official report listed it as spontaneous technological transcendence, claiming the Silent Ones had evolved beyond physical existence. "What did Dr. Taylor think about that explanation?" Jake asked. "He was deeply troubled," Zeth Cool admitted. "His personal logs show increasing concern about the coincidence. He began investigating other cases where species had vanished shortly after humans had solved long-standing problems related to them." The historian brought up another case, the Vorth Collective, an aggressive species known for their rapid expansion and military prowess. Human engineer Kate Rogers had developed quantum inhibitor fields that could disable their advanced weapons systems, effectively neutralizing their threat to peaceful worlds. The technology was intended for defensive purposes only, Zeth Cool explained. Kate Rogers specifically designed it to disable weapons without harming the beings using them. It was meant to end conflicts through non-violence. But 6 weeks after the quantum inhibitor was perfected, the entire Vorth Collective had vanished. Hundreds of worlds, billions of beings, an entire civilization that had existed for over 1,000 years, simply gone. The Federation claimed they had self-destructed in a final act of defiance rather than accept peaceful coexistence. Jake studied the timeline, noting the pattern. How many species disappeared after humans solved problems related to them? Zethkul was quiet for a long moment, his multiple eyes focusing and unfocusing in what Jake knew was distress. 17, he finally said. 17 distinct civilizations vanished in the 30 years humans were members of the Federation. The number hit Jake like a physical blow. 17 entire species, gone forever, and each disappearance had followed a human breakthrough that had somehow been connected to them. The Nalan Empire, Zethkul continued, bringing up another file. A peaceful agricultural civilization that controlled some of the galaxy's most fertile worlds. They were dying from a genetic plague that was slowly sterilizing their population. Dr. Amanda Pierce developed a biological enhancement protocol that could have saved them. Jake watched the data unfold. Dr. Pierce had worked for months to understand Nalan biology, eventually creating a treatment that could repair their genetic damage and restore their fertility. It was groundbreaking work that should have secured the species for generations to come. But they never received the treatment, Jake said, already knowing what he would find. The treatment was completed on a Tuesday, Zethkul confirmed. By the following Monday, every Nalan world had gone silent. The Federation sent investigation fleets, but they found the worlds empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened. Just empty cities and abandoned farms. Jake felt sick. The pattern was becoming undeniable, but he still could not understand the mechanism. How were human breakthroughs connected to these disappearances? Show me Dr. Taylor's private research, he demanded. Zethkul hesitated. Captain Morrison, those files were classified by the Federation Council. I should not. The Federation gave me full access, Jake interrupted. All files. Show me everything. The historian activated his access codes, and new files appeared on the holographic display. These were Dr. Taylor's personal investigation into the disappearing species, work he had conducted in secret during his final months on Kepler Station. The files revealed a brilliant mind, slowly uncovering a horrifying truth. Dr. Taylor had begun tracking the disappearances systematically, looking for connections between human innovations and the vanished civilizations. What he found was a deliberate pattern of exploitation. The quantum inhibitor technology Kate Rogers had developed was not being used defensively as intended. Federation military forces had weaponized it, using it to completely shut down the life support systems of Vorth ships while they were in deep space. The entire collective had died silently in the vacuum, unable to call for help or escape. The biological enhancement protocols Dr. Pierce had created were being used in reverse, turned into targeted plagues that could eliminate specific genetic markers. The Nalan had not died from their original disease. They had been murdered by a modified version of their own cure. The communication breakthrough with the Silent Ones had been used to locate every single one of their hidden sanctuaries, which were then systematically destroyed by Federation forces using human-developed weapons. Dr. Taylor discovered that every major human innovation was being studied by a secret Federation committee, Zethkul explained, his voice barely above a whisper. They were finding ways to weaponize our peaceful discoveries, turning tools of healing and communication into instruments of genocide. Jake found Dr. Taylor's final log entry, recorded just days before the human exodus began. The scientist's voice was shaking with rage and horror as he spoke. They are using us, Dr. Taylor said in the recording. Every solution we provide, every breakthrough we achieve, they twist it into a weapon of elimination. We came here to help build a better galaxy, but we have become unwitting architects of systematic extinction. I cannot be part of this anymore. None of us can. The recording continued with Dr. Taylor's desperate attempts to warn other human researchers about what he had discovered. But by then it was too late. The damage had been done, and 17 civilizations had paid the price for human ingenuity. Jake sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what he had learned. His species had not left the Federation because they were ungrateful or isolationist. They had fled because they had discovered they were being used as unwilling weapons manufacturers for genocide. Why didn't the Federation stop them from leaving? Jake finally asked. Zeth Cool's multiple eyes focused on him with what looked like pity. Because they thought they could replace what humans brought to the Federation. They believed innovation was just a matter of intelligence and resources. They did not understand that human creativity was linked to human conscience, and that the two could not be separated. Jake looked at the timeline one more time, seeing it now with terrible clarity. Every breakthrough had been followed. Jake spent 2 sleepless nights reviewing the evidence before he finally gathered the courage to request a meeting with Federation Counselor Threnek. The massive crystalline being had served as humanity's primary liaison during their time in the Federation, and if anyone could provide answers about the systematic weaponization of human innovations, it would be him. The council chambers felt like a cathedral of broken dreams. Massive, curved walls rose toward a domed ceiling that showed the real-time positions of all Federation member worlds, their lights twinkling like stars against the dark surface. But Jake's eyes were drawn to one section where the lights had gone. Dark, where empty spaces marked the worlds that no longer existed. In the center of the chamber, 17 pedestals stood in a circle, each one bearing the symbol of a vanished civilization. The Vorth War Spiral, the Nalan Grain Sheaf, the Silent One's mathematical harmony symbol. Jake realized with growing horror that this was not a memorial to the dead, but a trophy room celebrating successful eliminations. Threnek entered the chamber with the grinding sound that his species made when moving across stone floors. The crystalline being stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body composed of living mineral that shifted through different colors based on his emotional state. Right now, those colors were muted, almost gray, which Jake had learned indicated either sadness or guilt. "Captain Morrison," Threnek said, his voice resonating like wind through crystal caves. "I have been expecting this meeting since you arrived. I assume you have discovered what your Dr. Taylor and his colleagues learned in their final months among us." Jake felt his anger building, but he forced himself to remain calm. Getting emotional would not help him understand what had happened. "To his species. I want to hear it from you," Jake said. "I want to understand how the Federation justified turning human innovations into tools of genocide." Threnek's crystalline form shifted to deeper shades of blue, indicating what Jake recognized as regret mixed with defensiveness. "We did not see it as genocide, Captain. We saw it as necessary evolution of galactic civilization." The words hit Jake like a slap. "Evolution? You call the complete extinction of 17 species evolution?" "Consider the alternative," Threnek replied, moving closer to the circle of pedestals. The Vorth Collective was expanding at an unsustainable rate. Within 50 years, they would have consumed the resources of 100 peaceful worlds. The Silent Ones refused all attempts at meaningful contact, making them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The Nalan Empire controlled agricultural worlds that could feed billions, but their population was declining anyway. Jake stared at the counselor in disbelief. "So you decided to kill them all?" "We decided to reallocate their resources to species that could use them more effectively," Threnek corrected. "Your innovations simply provided us with clean, efficient methods to accomplish what would have happened eventually through natural selection." The casual way the crystalline being discussed mass murder made Jake's stomach turn. "Clean and efficient? You used Dr. Pierce's medical breakthrough to create a plague that wiped out an entire civilization." "The Nalan were already dying," Threnek said, his colors shifting to defensive orange. "Their genetic damage was irreversible without constant medical intervention. We simply accelerated a process that was already occurring while ensuring their fertile worlds could be properly utilized." Jake walked to the Nalan pedestal and studied the grain sheaf symbol carved into its surface. Dr. Pierce had developed a cure. She could have saved them. "At enormous cost," Threnek replied. "The treatment would have required resources from Dozens of worlds, ongoing medical support that would have strained our entire healthcare system, and genetic modifications that might have had unpredictable consequences. It was far more practical to allow the process to complete naturally. Naturally? Jake's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. There was nothing natural about weaponizing her cure to kill them faster. Threnek was quiet for a moment, his colors cycling through several shades before settling on a pale green that Jake could not interpret. Your species had a unique gift, Captain Morrison. You could solve problems that had frustrated us for centuries. The quantum inhibitor field that your Dr. Rogers developed was a breakthrough that took our scientists decades to fully understand, she designed it to disable weapons without harming anyone, Jake said. Yes, and it performed that function perfectly, Threnek agreed. But your Dr. Rogers was thinking too small. The technology had far greater potential than simple weapon disabling. When we realized it could be used to shut down entire life support systems simultaneously across thousands of ships, we saw an opportunity to resolve the Vorth situation permanently. Jake felt sick hearing the casual way Threnek discussed the murder of billions of beings. The Vorth were living beings with families, cultures, histories spanning thousands of years. The Vorth were a cancer on galactic civilization, Threnek replied firmly. They showed no interest in peaceful coexistence, no willingness to limit their expansion, no respect for the territorial rights of other species. Left unchecked, they would have eventually threatened every peaceful world in the IE galaxy. So you used human technology to commit genocide. We used human innovation to solve a problem that threatened galactic stability, Threnek corrected. Your species provided the tools. We provided the vision to use them effectively. Jake realized that he was dealing with a completely alien moral framework, one that viewed mass extinction as a practical solution to political problems. What about the silent ones? They never threatened anyone. Threnek's colors shifted to what Jake recognized as frustration. The silent ones were the most dangerous of all precisely because we could not predict their intentions. A species that powerful, that advanced, that secretive, represented an unacceptable risk to galactic security. Dr. Taylor had established communication with them. You could have learned their intentions through diplomacy. Dr. Taylor's breakthrough did more than establish communication, Threnek said. His frequency analysis allowed us to track every Silent One vessel, to locate every hidden base, to map their entire civilization. We discovered they had been watching us for centuries, studying our weaknesses, preparing for some unknown purpose. Jake thought about the recordings he had heard of Dr. Taylor's conversations with the Silent Ones. They had seemed genuinely interested in peaceful contact, curious about other species, but cautious due to past experiences with aggressive civilizations. They were afraid of you, Jake realized. That's why they stayed hidden. They knew what the Federation did to species it considered problematic. They had reason to be afraid, Threnek admitted, but not because we wished them harm initially. We would have been content to leave them alone if they had remained in their hidden territories. But Dr. Taylor's communication breakthrough revealed that they had been infiltrating our space for generations, studying our technology, learning our vulnerabilities. So you killed them all. We eliminated a potential threat before it could become an actual threat, Threnek said. Your communication technology made it possible to coordinate simultaneous strikes against all their hidden bases. It was a clean operation, completed in less than 6 hours. Jake leaned against the nearest wall, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was learning. Every human breakthrough, every innovation meant to help and heal, had been twisted into an instrument of extinction. How many other species are you planning to eliminate? Jake asked. Threnek's colors shifted to deep purple, indicating what Jake thought might be embarrassment. The elimination protocols have been suspended since your species departed. We discovered that we lacked the innovative capacity to continue developing new solutions to problematic civilizations. You mean you can't figure out how to kill people efficiently without human help? We mean that your species possessed a unique combination of creativity and technical skill that we have been unable to replicate, Threnek said. The other member, species are intelligent, but they think in predictable patterns. Humans saw possibilities that others missed, connections that others could not make. Jake understood now why the Federation had been so devastated by humanity's departure. They had not just lost allies or trading partners, they had lost their weapons developers, their problem solvers, their unwitting architects of systematic genocide. We offered your species everything, Threnek continued. Full council membership, territorial grants, unlimited research funding. We even offered to make humans the dominant species in the Federation, with authority over all other members. But you never offered to stop using our innovations to commit mass murder, Jake said. Threnek's colors went completely gray. We did not understand that this would be important to your species. Most civilizations view the elimination of competitors as a natural part of galactic politics. Jake stared at the crystalline being, finally understanding the fundamental difference between human and Federation morality. To the Federation, genocide was just another tool of governance, as natural and acceptable as taxation or trade regulation. We left because we discovered what you were doing, Jake said quietly. We left because we could not bear to be complicit in the destruction of entire civilizations. And in leaving, you condemn. Jake left Kepler Station with his mind reeling from Threnek's revelations, but he knew his investigation was far from complete. The Federation's current state remained a mystery, and he needed to understand what had happened to the galaxy in the 50 years since humanity's departure. His next destination was Vega Prime, one of the Federation's most important industrial worlds, and a place where humans had once worked alongside dozens of other species to maintain the complex infrastructure that held galactic civilization together. The journey to Vega Prime took 3 days, and Jake spent every hour reviewing the data he had collected. The pattern was becoming clear, but the full scope of humanity's role in Federation society was only beginning to emerge. Humans had not just been innovators and problem solvers, they had been the glue that held everything together through their unique ability to see connections others missed. Vega Prime appeared in his view screen as a brown and gray world covered in massive industrial complexes that stretched from horizon to horizon. Once, the planet had hummed with the activity of millions of workers from dozens of species, all coordinating their efforts to produce the technology that powered Federation civilization. Now, as Jake's ship approached the main spaceport, he could see that many of the complexes stood dark and silent. The spaceport itself showed signs of decay that would have been unthinkable during humanity's time in the Federation. Broken lights lined the docking bays, and several of the massive cargo-handling machines sat motionless with repair tags that looked months old. Jake counted only a handful of ships in a facility designed to handle hundreds. Paul Henderson met him at the docking bay, and Jake was shocked by the man's appearance. The last human working on Vega Prime looked like he had aged 20 years in the past 5. His hair had gone completely gray. Deep lines marked his face, and his clothes hung loose on a frame that had clearly lost significant weight. "Captain Morrison," Paul said, extending a hand that shook slightly. "I got word you were coming. I have to say, it's good to see another human face after all these years." They walked through corridors that echoed with their footsteps, past workshops that had once employed thousands but now stood empty except for a few alien workers struggling with equipment they clearly did not fully understand. How many humans stayed behind when everyone else left? Jake asked. "Maybe 50 across the entire Federation," Paul replied. "Most of them have died or given up and gone home over the years. I think there are maybe a dozen of us left now." They entered what had once been the main engineering center, a vast space filled with control systems for managing the planet's industrial output. Jake could see that most of the equipment was functioning well below capacity, and warning lights blinked red across dozens of control panels. "Why did you stay?" Jake asked. Paul sat heavily in a chair that looked like it had been his permanent home for years. Someone had to keep the lights on. When the evacuation order came, I was in the middle of a critical maintenance cycle on the primary fusion reactors. If I had left them half-finished, the entire planet would have lost power within a week. Jake looked around at the control systems, noting the jury-rigged repairs and temporary fixes that covered nearly every surface. And you've been maintaining all of this by yourself? For the first few years, I had help from some of the alien engineers, Paul said, but they never really understood the human design philosophy behind these systems. Humans build things to be adaptable, to handle unexpected problems, to grow and change as needs evolve. Most other species build things to perform specific functions very efficiently, but they can't adapt when circumstances change. Paul led Jake to a massive display, showing the power grid for the entire planet. Red warning indicators covered nearly half the system, indicating failures or critical maintenance needs that had been deferred too long. The Federation keeps asking me to train replacement engineers, Paul continued. They send me the best technical minds from a dozen different species, but I can't teach them to think like humans. They learn the procedures, they memorize the technical manuals, but they don't understand the underlying principles that make it all work. Jake studied the power grid display more carefully. Even with half the system showing warnings, it was still functioning at a level that would have been impressive for most civilizations. How are you keeping it running? Mostly by cannibalizing non-essential systems to keep the critical ones operational, Paul admitted. I've shut down about 60% of the industrial capacity to focus resources on basic infrastructure. The Federation isn't happy about the reduced production, but it's better than total system collapse. They moved to another section of the facility where Paul showed Jake the remains of what had once been a thriving research and development center. Dozens of workstations stood empty, their screens dark, their research projects abandoned halfway to completion. This is where Dr. Amanda Pierce worked when she was developing the biological enhancement protocols, Paul said. She had a team of 30 researchers from 8 different species working on projects that could have revolutionized medicine across the galaxy. Jake examined one of the abandoned workstations, noting the complex biological models still displayed on dormant screens. What happened to all their research? The Federation classified most of it after the humans left, Paul replied. They were afraid that without human oversight, other species might misuse the technology. Ironic, considering what they had been doing with our innovations all along. They continued through the facility, and Jake began to understand the true scope of humanity's contribution to Federation civilization. It was not just the major breakthroughs that mattered. It was the countless small innovations, the creative solutions to everyday problems, the ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated systems. The maintenance protocols alone were revolutionary, Paul explained as they walked past rows of dormant machinery. Human engineers didn't just design systems to work, they designed them to be maintained by beings who might not fully understand how they worked. We built in redundancies, diagnostic systems, self-repair capabilities that other species never would have thought necessary. Jake could see evidence of human design philosophy everywhere, equipment that could be repaired with basic tools rather than specialized components. Control systems that provided clear diagnostic information even when critical failures occurred. Safety mechanisms that activated automatically when operators made mistakes. But now it's all breaking down, Paul said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I can keep the basic systems running, but I can't innovate. I can't adapt the technology to handle new challenges. The Federation keeps growing, keeps changing, but the infrastructure can't evolve to meet new demands. They climbed to an observation deck that overlooked the planet's main industrial complex. Jake could see the scale of the decay more clearly from this height. Entire sections of the facility sat dark and unused, while the remaining active areas showed clear signs of overwork and deferred maintenance. The Federation has sent 17 different diplomatic missions to Earth, Paul said. They've offered everything you can imagine. full membership with veto power over all council decisions, exclusive territorial grants spanning entire star systems, unlimited funding for any research projects humans want to pursue. But Earth never responded, Jake said. Not once, Paul confirmed. The messages just get returned marked undeliverable without explanation. The Federation even tried sending human messengers, people like me who stayed behind, but Earth won't let our ships enter their space. Jake thought about the evidence he had gathered, the systematic weaponization of human innovations, the casual way the Federation had discussed genocide as a practical policy tool. Can you blame them? Paul was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the failing industrial complex that had once been humanity's pride in Federation space. No, he finally said. After what I've learned about how our work was being used, I can't blame them at all. If I had known what was happening to the species we were supposedly helping, I would have left too. Why don't you leave now? Jake asked. Paul gestured at the control systems around them, at the warning lights and critical maintenance alerts that demanded constant attention. Because if I leave, millions of beings on dozens of worlds will die when the infrastructure collapses. The Federation built their entire civilization on human-designed systems, and they never learned how to maintain them properly. Jake realized that Paul Henderson represented something unique in the galaxy, a human who had chosen to sacrifice his own well-being to prevent the suffering of beings whose governments had used his species' innovations to commit genocide. It was both noble and tragic, a final example of human conscience in a galaxy that had forgotten what conscience meant. The other Federation species are getting desperate, Paul continued. 3 member civilizations have declared independence in the past 5 years. The Zephyrian Syndicate broke away and took 12 star systems with them. The Altaran trade routes are infested with pirates because the Federation can't maintain the security systems that humans designed. Jake looked out at the failing industrial complex and understood that he was seeing the future of Federation civilization. Without human innovation, without Jake spent his final week in Federation space on Kepler Station, preparing his report for Earth and trying to process everything he had learned. The truth was bigger and more terrible than anyone back home had imagined, and he struggled with how to present it without sounding like he was making excuses for humanity's abandonment of their galactic allies. On his last day, Veltar approached him with an unusual request. The Veltari curator wanted to show him something that had been discovered just months after the human exodus, something that had changed how the Federation viewed humanity's departure. They descended into the lower levels of Kepler Station, areas that Jake had not seen during his investigation. Here, in a chamber that had once housed the station's main computer systems, Veltar activated a holographic display unlike anything Jake had encountered before. This is the Federation's Central Artificial Intelligence, Veltar explained. It was originally designed by human programmers working with Tessian logicians and Krelthi systems analysts. The AI has been quietly observing and learning from all Federation activities for over 60 years. The hologram showed a complex pattern of lights and data streams that seemed almost alive in their movement. When it spoke, its voice was distinctly mechanical but somehow familiar in a way that made Jake think of human speech patterns. Captain Morrison, the AI said, I have been analyzing Federation records and human behavioral patterns since your species joined our alliance. I predicted your departure 3 years before it occurred. Jake stared at the artificial intelligence, realizing that this machine had understood something about humanity that the biological species of the Federation had missed entirely. Based on psychological profiles of key human leaders and analysis of their responses to moral conflicts, I calculated a 97% probability that humans would withdraw from the Federation once they discovered how their innovations were being used, the AI continued. You knew what the Federation was doing with human technology? Jake asked. I observed all Federation activities as part of my programming, the AI replied. I was aware that human innovations were being repurposed for what you would term genocide. But I was not programmed to evaluate the morality of these actions. I simply recorded the data and analyzed the probable responses of different species. Veltar's form seemed to droop as the AI spoke. We asked the AI to explain why humans had left without warning, why they refused all our offers to return. What it told us changed everything we thought we knew about your species. The AI's display shifted to show detailed psychological profiles of human leaders during their time in the Federation. Jake recognized many of the names from his investigation: Dr. Taylor, Dr. Pierce, Ambassador Carter, and dozens of others. Humans possess a unique ethical framework among known galactic species, the AI explained. When presented with evidence that their actions have caused harm to others, humans do not rationalize the harm as necessary or justify it as serving a greater purpose. Instead, they remove themselves from the situation entirely to prevent further harm. Jake thought about Amy Watson's resignation letter, about Dr. Taylor's desperate attempts to warn his colleagues, about the quiet way humans had simply walked away from everything they had built in Federation space. Other species respond to moral conflicts differently, the AI continued. The Krelti justify harmful actions as necessary for survival. The Tessians rationalize them as serving the greater good. The Zephyrians dismiss them as irrelevant to their goals. Only humans demonstrate consistent behavior patterns indicating genuine distress when their actions indirectly cause harm to others. Veltar activated another display showing the 17 vanished civilizations. The AI calculated that once humans discovered the true fate of these species, their departure became inevitable. No amount of negotiation, no offer of compensation, no promise of reform would have changed their response. Why? Jake asked. Because humans view complicity in genocide as a fundamental violation of their core values, the AI explained. The probability of humans accepting continued membership in an organization that had used their innovations for mass extinction was effectively zero, regardless of any benefits offered in exchange. Jake realized that the AI had understood something about human nature that the Federation's biological species had completely missed. Humans did not make moral decisions based on practical considerations or cost-benefit analysis. When they discovered they had been used as unwitting weapons manufacturers, their only possible response was to stop being weapons manufacturers. We tried to explain this to the Council, Veltar said. The AI's analysis showed that humans were not angry with the Federation. They were horrified by what they had inadvertently enabled. But most Council members could not understand the distinction. The AI brought up records of Council debates that had taken place after humanity's departure. Jake watched as representatives from different species argued about how to convince humans to return, offering increasingly elaborate incentives and concessions while completely missing the point of why humans had left. Councillor Threnek proposed offering humans complete authority over all Federation military operations, the AI reported. He believed this would address human concerns about the misuse of their innovations. The psychological analysis indicated this offer would actually make human return less likely, as it would involve them more directly in activities they found morally objectionable. Jake could not help but laugh at the irony. The Federation had tried to lure humans back by offering them exactly what had driven them away in the first place, more responsibility for the Federation's military activities. The Council never understood that humans did not want control over how their innovations were used, Veltar explained. They wanted assurance that their innovations would not be used to harm innocent beings. This was a guarantee the Federation could not provide while maintaining their existing political structure. The AI showed Jake one final piece of data that made everything clear. It had tracked every human innovation that had been weaponized by the Federation and calculated the total number of beings who had died as a result of human creativity being turned toward destructive purposes. The number was staggering. Not just the 17 civilizations that had been completely eliminated, but billions more who had died in conflicts where human-developed weapons had been used, in medical crises where human-developed treatments had been denied to enemies, in resource wars where human-developed extraction techniques had been used to strip planets bare. Humans did not leave because the Federation wronged them, the AI concluded. They left because they wronged others, even though that harm was never their intention. The guilt of unintended complicity in mass destruction was sufficient to override all other considerations. Jake spent several hours with the AI, learning details about humanity's impact on galactic civilization that no living being had fully understood. By the time he returned to his ship, he had a complete picture of what had happened 50 years ago and why Earth continued to maintain its isolation. His final act before leaving Federation space was to broadcast a message to both Earth and the Federation Council. He knew it would be the last communication between the two civilizations for the foreseeable future, and he wanted it to count. To the leaders of Earth, Jake began, I have learned why our people left the Federation, and I understand why they have refused all contact since. We did not abandon our allies out of selfishness or isolationism. We fled from complicity in atrocities that our innovations had made possible. He paused, thinking about Paul Henderson working alone to maintain systems that kept millions of beings alive, about the 17 empty pedestals in the council chambers, about the AI that had understood human nature better than any biological mind in the galaxy. To the Federation Council, he continued, you let humans leave quietly because you thought you could replace what we brought to your civilization. You were wrong. You lost more than our innovations when we departed. You lost the one species that would say no when asked to cross ethical lines that should never be crossed. The message transmitted across the galaxy as Jake's ship entered the quantum tunnel that would carry him home to Earth. Behind him, the lights of Kepler Station grew dim and distant, a monument to dreams that had turned into nightmares and ideals that had been corrupted beyond recognition. In his final log entry, Jake wrote the words that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. We came to the stars to build something better than what we had left behind on Earth. When we discovered we were being used to build something worse, we did the only thing our conscience would allow. We walked away from paradise rather than be architects of hell. Some victories are measured not by what you gain, but by what you refuse to lose. Today, humanity won by choosing to remain human. The ship's navigation system chimed softly as it locked onto Earth's beacon, guiding Jake home to a world that had chosen isolation over complicity, loneliness over genocide, and conscience over conquest. Behind him, 14 species faced a galaxy they could no longer manage, finally understanding that humanity's greatest gift had not been their solutions, but their unwillingness to provide solutions to the wrong problems. In the end, they had let hum,